household of faith. And sometimes we're tired physically, and I say, Lord, I don't know how I'm going to make it. It's always God can just give us that little. It's funny, I stand in the corner, I said, Lord, I'm kind of tired today. I'm weary, and when Brother Johnny called, and so I said, well, okay. And sometimes I have to think about what I agreed to, meaning that we had the crusade for this week and all these activities and football games. But by the grace of God, we're here. Let me tell you something. On Friday night, I had to go up to Poly High School, Baltimore Institute of Polytechnic. That's one of them long school, high school football game it was. And to film a game, because I volunteered at Northwestern High School. And so I went up there, and it's way on the top part of Baltimore, 695, and then I had to leave there and go back to the hospital, you know, do my thing. And it was just a lot of driving. And I made it safely, and Saturday, I had to go to Wheaton for another game. A lot more traveling, more long roads. But then, after all was said and done, I was finally finished with work. Finally about to go home. One stop away from home, and I got over here in 202, and my tire blew out. Right in the open parking lot. And at first I was upset. I said, you know what? But when I thought about all the things we had done last week, from Baltimore to the Crusade for Christ, from D.C., dozens of trips, hundreds of miles, literally, God waited to that last point to remind me, you need a new tire. That just shows you that we serve a God who has mercy on us when we don't have mercy on ourselves. Sometimes we don't know when to stop. But one thing I realized this week, that God is still in charge of my son. And the thing about it is that I thank God that he had enough kindness and mercy to extend on my foolish self, my non-buying tire, cheap tire self, that he had mercy on me. Because God knows. You see that? That's the theme of the lesson today. God, he knows. And what I do when I put together lessons, sometimes I do the research, the study. In fact, I've been studying this passage for 3 months. And at the end, I said, what points do I want to make? And what is the conclusion of this message? And I concluded it just a few seconds ago when I came back to get something to drink, is that he knows. He knows your plight. He knows your circumstance. See, we celebrate Labor Day with cookouts, hamburgers, and all this other stuff. I hope I can find some of that stuff too. You know, we like to have a good celebration. But you understand how Labor Day came about? 1897. A big strike in Chicago. Grover Cleveland was the president. And the Pullman company, the Pullman Porters, you heard the Pullman Porters, the train. And them guys, the African Americans, they were just dignified. Their job was to clean up other folks' linen. Their job was to be in a very oppressive system. But they took an oppressive situation and turned it into a glorified moment. And now people look with just honor. Oh, he was a Pullman Porter. My great-granddad was a Pullman Porter. I mean, they looked distinguished. They were distinguished folks. But basically, they worked on the railroad for an oppressive man named George Pullman. In fact, the conditions were so bad, they had a riot in Chicago. And as I was reading, I was looking at my phone. This is like my little mini research thing. I was looking on the internet while I was over there about that strike in 1890s. And what happened as a result of a compromise between the striking workers after so many people had died because, have you met, slow down. So many people were so upset about their conditions that they worked in that they decided to fight rather than work. They decided that they had taken enough. And as a result of the labor unrest and the people dying because they could no longer work in those conditions, they had a strike. And as a result of a compromise, they said everybody just take the day off. Well, that day off became Labor Day. And that's why we have Labor Day now. That's a Labor Day message. But you know, before Grover Cleveland, we had somebody else that had a recipe for labor. And they found that in 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 2. Now, you may not understand this message. That's why you need to come to Sunday school. And anytime you know I'm speaking, come to Sunday school because that lays the foundation for our lesson. Now, 1 Peter chapter 2, we see something that may sound kind of crazy at first or abusive, but it's really not. It says, 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 18, it says, servants, be submissive to your masters with all respect, not only to those who are good and gentle, but also to those who are unreasonable. For this finds favor if the sake of conscience towards God. A person bears up under sorrows when suffering unjustly. For what credit is it there when you sin and are harshly treated? You endure it with patience. But if when you do what is right and suffer for it, you patiently endure it, this finds favor with God. Do we serve a God that's so mean and insensitive that he puts people in charge of us to beat us down? Do we serve a God that's so unholy, unbalanced that he feels that some group has to be above another group? Can't we take matters in our own hands? Should we stay in slavery? Should we be able to be in an oppressive situation just so we can have some kind of underclass? No. What Peter teaches us in this lesson, what we learn is that there's something bigger than man. Man cannot deal with man problems. Man is not perfect. Man is infallible. Man has issues. But we serve a God who's still omnipotent. That means he knows all, is all, was yesterday, will be today, and will be tomorrow. We have to understand the omnipotence, the power of God. The things happen for a reason. That God gives us the capacity to teach lessons through others. The only reason why we're here on this earth, brother and sister, is to be a living example and a living contrast to the world. Big point. Remember that. We are a living manifestation. A living candle. I don't know where that word came. It's candle. The word says what? Let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works to glorify God in heaven. Now, if I go to an ice cream place or Walt Disney World, everybody is happy. We like to sing that song, everybody will be happy over there. You know that song. But how about over here? You know, how can I be happy? If you give me a nice plate of food or something good, I'm going to smile. A dog licks and laughs when you feed him. Anybody is happy when they get something good. Everybody's cheering when the Redskin wins. Everybody likes a winner. We like happy things. But what happens when we have the other side of life? When things are not going well, when there's harsh treatment, when things are going wrong, the world will tell you to trade up, get rid of, get something new, get a new wife, get a new car, do something new. The old is gone. We like new things. We don't like old stuff. We don't like to deal with the negative, don't we? No, I don't. But God tells us that in life, we just can't go with the flow. 1 Peter 2:18 teaches us that there's a higher authority than man. There's also a higher authority than feeding our desires. There's something bigger. People look, Grover Cleveland's compromise. Look, just let all go home. Just rest. I can't deal with this. Just get a rest. But God was saying, wait a minute. Sometimes in life, you got to hang in there on that job. Sometimes in life, you're going to take abuse. Because somebody who doesn't do it the wrong way needs to see somebody who does it the right way. Sometimes you got to stay with that husband. Sometimes you got to, now I'm going to be a fool, go out there and get hurt. But sometimes, and again, all kind of abuse is not physical abuse. There's emotional abuse. When you walk on the job and people start whispering, and you know they're talking about you, but you can't prove it. Or when you go in a situation, and I know you post sisters go through this, you know, and all y'all nice lookers, I know you go through it, and you walk through a place that men just start staring, they look you up and down with their eyes. And all you can do is look straight forward, keep working. It hurts. You feel violated. You feel angry. But you know what? You keep on working anyway. You keep on trying to be positive. And sometimes it's hard just to say good morning to people in it. Sometimes it's hard just to get it through the day. You look at it, it's only 9:30. You think it's noon. Eat your lunch at 10 and you're still hungry. You know what I'm saying? Why you go through? Because you don't want to be there. It's a hard thing. But God said, hang in there. I got your back, folks. I know it's hard. I know you're suffering. And the thing about it is that sometimes you haven't done anything wrong. But Peter tells us, even when you're dealing with a harsh master, let's explain this. 4 points. Like he said, first thing Peter wanted us to give instructions. It was a specific group of slaves. See, you had house slaves. See, they had two Greek words. One word is orkitai. That means the house slaves. The other word was doulos. We heard doulos, servants. And so this is not talking about just a general group of slaves. This was a specific group of slaves that was in their household. That means the world saw them as part of their house. In fact, Aristotle was very abusive. And basically, Aristotle said, well, they really don't have any rights. The master has the rights. The master is in charge. Therefore, wives, children, and slaves all are subjected to the master. And therefore, they're just property because all the economics, in fact, in Rome in that period of time, you had over 1 million slaves. There wasn't over 6 million people in the city. It was a pretty big city. Now, and a fifth of them were slaves. You could become into slavery just because you didn't pay your bills. You could become a slave just because you lost a war. People who should not have been slaves, nobody should be a slave, but slavery was something that you didn't ask to get. We didn't ask to be slaves in North America. We were just born a certain way, just looked a certain way. Life is not fair. But God has a solution to slavery. God is still in charge. And so what we have to understand, man could create all kind of crazy things, all kind of crazy methodologies, but we have to always keep in mind that we serve a God who's still in charge, who has our best interests, and we are in his will. Understand that we are in his will. And so the thing about it is that, so we had this situation where you had this specific group of people who were targeted for some reason. But he stressed several plights. And what he wanted us to understand is that it didn't mean that just because, even when you become a Christian, sometimes we think when we become a Christian that everything's going to be all right over here. It doesn't mean it. There are so many examples. If you look at Hebrews chapter 11, real quick, go to Hebrews chapter 11. Verse 8, it says, by faith Abraham, when he was called, obeyed by going out to a place where he was receiving inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith he lived as an alien in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, fellow heirs of the same promise. For he was looking for the city which has foundations, whose architect, the builder, is God. By faith even Sarah herself received the ability to conceive, even beyond the proper time of life, since she considered him faithful and had promised. Therefore they were born even of one man, and him as good as dead, as that as many descendants. All these died without receiving the promises, but having seen them and having welcomed them from a distance, having confessed that they were strangers and exiles of the earth. For those who say such things make it clear that they are seeking a country of their own. You know, you got all these people beside, like Noah. You had Noah, you had Enoch, you had, have a lot of people, Cain, and Abel was killed. In fact, the preacher talked about Cain at the crusade. You have so many people, who look at Samson. In the end, he died. The pillars fell on him. He didn't get to see the promised land. You got things in the Old Testament. You got a lot of people who were part of this road. Imagine, Hagar. Imagine Ruth. All these people did things and were called to suffer. And they didn't often have the benefits and to see the fruits of their labor, but they lived by faith. And what we have to understand is that we are part of a continuum of a great crowd of witnesses who have gone before us, and that sometimes in life, our earthly assignment may be full of suffering. But the question becomes, will you remain faithful? You think people like Marshall Keeble, I still remember the story when Keeble was preaching, and I got to speak to the guy who wrote that book, and who came to our house last week, Dr. Robinson. I told you that story about how Marshall Keeble was preaching to a group of Klansmen. Remember that? And how they came busted through the door. He was preaching in Georgia, a gospel meeting, and the Klan came in there and wanted Keeble to read a note about how the white man was superior to the blacks and stuff. And Keeble didn't miss a beat. He preached the sermon, read the note, and by the end of that gospel meeting, had over 100 people become to Christ. Because he didn't worry about what some folks thought of us as a people. He wanted to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. He had to endure a lot of things.